sound speed. Hi, I'm Phil the Blythe, and that whole experience that you just witnessed is pretty much a good summary how my summer has been. I would say that this is probably the worst burnout I've maybe ever experienced. Yeah, it's been really, really, really bad. Yeah, basically since February. I've experienced... Okay, I'm back. It seems like the world today is anything that can go wrong. Filming will go wrong. But I'm going to jump into it because my camera will die soon. Anyway, so this video is things I wish I knew before becoming a Hellenic polytheist. I wrote them when I was feeling a certain way, so they might be a bit unusual. Burnout.
Bad.
All right. There are 11 things. Number 1, books have a lot of knowledge, but so do you. No one has the answers, even the ancients. I know. Bring your pitchforks. Books are a great jumping off place. I do read some of them, but I go through phases, like I'm not always studying stuff. If that's what you like to do, fine by me, but ultimately you have answers too. You have divination. You have other people that you can talk to. You can listen inwards, and I think that will give you a much more accurate picture of what kind of path works for you. Number 2, you don't have to be interested in or believe in everything. Just because some ancient philosophers said one thing at a certain time does not mean that it is the truth for you. I was speaking with a friend of mine about the paradox of truth. In his tradition, there are 2 kinds of truth. There's lowercase t truth and there's capital T truth. Capital T truth is the laws that govern the universe. Gravity, the sun, science, these things that they're not beliefs because they are provable. And lowercase t truths are the paradoxical aspect that kind of live sometimes within these capital T truths. Religion is paradoxical, and I think we need to not be afraid of paradox. So that being said, just because you see someone say something on the internet does not mean you have to believe it. Just because someone shares their beliefs with you does not mean you have to believe it. Now, I believe in respecting everyone's religion so long as it is not harming others, but you don't have to necessarily believe that it is true for you. And that being said, you don't have to be interested in every aspect of Hellenic polytheism. You don't have to be interested in philosophy. I know, even though I'm kind of rambling about philosophical musings here, I'm genuinely not interested in ancient Western philosophy. You also don't have to be interested in holidays. You don't have to be interested in certain gods. It's about, again, finding that truth for you, which might look different for someone else. Number 3, community is important. Community is the point. This might be a bit jarring, especially for those who come from a solitary witchcraft practice. Hellenic polytheism as a religion was a community religion. The festivals focused on community. Aspects of worship were meant to create this harmonious community environment. Community looks different for everyone. This can be online community. I also believe that nature is part of our community too. Being in community with humans and more than humans, in my personal opinion, and the way that I go about my life is the purpose. It's not necessarily even your own religious community. Human beings are social creatures, and this is very evident in the way that our religions are constructed. These religions sprung up out of a way to glue communities together. Within these religious communities, there were individuals who did solitary practices, but many times those solitary practices would feed the community. When I studied my witchcraft and religion class in college, one of the things that my professor presented to us was that one of the main differences between witchcraft and the dominant religion and prayer, etc., is community. Number 4, everything is divine, but some things are still imagined. Again, paradox. So I struggle a lot with maladaptive daydreaming. I know with maladaptive daydreaming, OCD, and ADHD, that means I have intrusive thoughts. And I know sometimes in discernment videos, people will talk about, oh, well, does this sound like you? Does this sound not like you? For me, with those 3 things, ADHD, maladaptive daydreaming, and OCD, many times my intrusive thoughts will not sound like me. And sometimes they also do sound like me. So in my experience, just seeing like, oh, well, it didn't sound like me is not enough for me to discern what it is. That's why I generally don't rely on internal cues. I rely almost exclusively on external forms of divination, because in my experience, any sort of internal intrusive image, and that's the other thing, it's not just intrusive thoughts, it's also intrusive images. I don't do any mind's eye stuff really, because again, those intrusive images, they have very often not been real for me. And so in my own personal practice, I cannot trust them. So I look for divination and I look for signs in the external world. I very often see Zeus in the clouds, for example, or I see Artemis and a lone deer walking across the pond at night, or I see Hermes. I hear Hermes in the sound of the subway in my daily commute. So I tend to look for the gods and the divine in the physical world, because I believe that everything in this world has an inherent divinity. Here is voiceover fell here to pick up where my camera left off with number 5. Practice is practice. The only person who gets to define your practice is you. But I do believe that there is a difference between musing about something and doing something. Now, doing can be as simple as praying. Some days, I only have the energy to pray very quietly, very briefly. For example, this past weekend, I was away and I did not have time to do anything at all. But in the morning when I had my coffee, I would very quickly say to Hester first and last, to all the gods. That's it. That's literally all I did. The word practice is an active one. But you get to define what action and what level of activity is right for you. 6, doubt is not the opposite of faith, but an expression of it. Do not run from burnout. I've talked about this pretty extensively in videos past. There's that Anne Lamott quote, the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certainty. And I agree 100%. It all goes back to paradox. The world is full of paradox, right? On one hand, drought, flood. Oh, that's not a fucking bald eagle? That's crazy. Anyway, drought, flood, hot, cold. The world is full of opposites. And many times these opposites coexist in impossible ways. I mean, the universe itself, literally the birth of the universe, is a paradox that we have been trying to wrestle with for so long. And I think the answer is we forget that we are animals too. And I don't think we will ever be able to conceptualize some things because our brains are literally limited, you know? So there are certain things that we will just never be able to fully rationalize, conceptualize, or explain. Just, you know, we're animals. We can't think of everything. Just like my cat can't conceptualize of concept of time, the concept of next week, you know, there are things that I'm not going to understand as a human as well. And that's where paradox comes in. That's where doubt comes in. And I think, to me, that is where most of my divine experiences have been, in that in-between place. And leading to that next part. Number 7, I'm just going to read this. We are infinitesimally small in the scale of the divine. We are not even ants in comparison to the might of galaxies. We aren't even atoms. We are quarks, ever breaking down and multiplying. How amazing it is that this ever-expanding universe, collapsing stars and stars reborn, conspired for our existence. that we looked to the heavens and gave them names. How even more amazing that they responded. Number 8. The sacred and the profane are not even a spectrum, but 2 parts of a whole. Laugh at yourself. Again, everything keeps coming back to paradox, I'm noticing here. And many times looking at ancient Greek festivals, there are acts of the sacred, like ritually mourning, cleansing yourself. And then there are acts of the profane. There are many times in festivals where part of it was ritual insulting people, essentially roasts. There was even one Dionysian festival that I've mentioned before where people would literally go around on a wagon just insulting people. And it seems kind of strange to us today, but part of those profane acts actually served a very sacred religious. I think sometimes people get very caught up in the seriousness, the pomp and circumstance of ritual, which leads me to 9, which I guess is kind of like 8.5, which is keep it simple but sublime. Now, what I mean by that is you can do a giant, large, grand ritual with a lot of fanfare, but it can also be something that doesn't mean a whole lot to you. It can be something that is, I don't want to say poorly done, because I feel like I can't judge. Like, I'm not the judge of that, but it can be something that doesn't feel right. But if you do something small, like even just lighting incense or sitting outside and listening to the sound of leaves, I don't want to say intention is everything, because I don't necessarily believe that, as someone who struggles a lot with emotions and intrusive thoughts. But I guess I would say commitment. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think commitment is everything in many ways. If you commit wholeheartedly to lighting incense and sitting and listening, I think ultimately that will mean more than a half-hearted grand ritual. Number 10, not everything will be a good experience. I've noticed there's this kind of strange reaction of people love and lighting deities and religious experiences. I think part of that is, again, that cultural Christianity, that baggage from toxic Christian culture, this almost thing where they take this aspect of God is good all the time God is good, and they almost project it onto pagan deities, and they project omniscience onto pagan deities, omnipresence. If you look at the text and other pagan cultures, this idea of an omniscient, omnipresent being is not really found. That's why epithets are really important, because they signal to the deity what I personally do not believe that any one deity is necessarily omniscient. They're not going to know everything that's going on in my life. It's so hard to explain. That doesn't mean that they don't know things are going on in your life, but I think it's a bit more complicated than that. Like, it's a bit more complicated than the Christian God who is omniscient, omnipresent. There's another omni in there that I forget. But yeah, I don't think the gods are omnipresent. I mean, this is very evident with Apollo and Dionysus swapping places at Delphi, in which in the winter, Apollo was just not there. He just wasn't there. He was in Hyperborea and was like not responding to people. Like, while there is divinity in all things, that doesn't mean the anthropomorphized aspect of the god is there at all times. I don't think they're necessarily doing something. That's a very human aspect of being busy. But, it's like it doesn't rain all the time. But that doesn't mean rain doesn't exist. I hope that makes sense. A lot of my perceptions of deities are very much how they're tied to the physical world and universe. But yeah, that being said, not everything will be a good experience. Not every religious experience is a feel-good experience, Sometimes spirits and deities are going to wreck your shit. I don't think they're always nice. We do have evidence of gods being angry at people. Like, not even just looking at mythology, looking at text from people who practiced, looking at votive offerings. We have evidence of people trying to propitiate the gods and be like, hey, stop being angry at me. I think it's hard to piss off a deity. Someone said this in a Discord server that I'm in, that the gods are not going to bend the laws of nature for you. We've been going through a major drought where I am. And a lot of it I've been feeling very angry with Zeus. Like, and that's the thing. You're allowed to be angry at the gods. You're allowed to be sad and angry. You're allowed to yell at them. I mean, how many times do we see over and over again, not just in ancient Greek mythology, not just in ancient Greek writings, but in even in Catholic writings, you hear of people beating the earth, screaming at icons. Anger is a very real expression of faith. I was like, why is this happening? Like, why is there a drought? Does Zeus hate me? And I had a series of conversations, serendipitous moments of basically Zeus being like, girl, it's not about you. And I think that's what it is. While the gods can be personal, you know, we are infinitesimally small. There's so much more at play that we cannot see. And ultimately, it's not about us. We are a part of this ecosystem of the universe. We are a part of the world. But the world does not revolve around us. The clouds do not bend to our will. Sometimes the sun burns us. Sometimes music hurts our ears. Like, I don't think we should love and light the ancient Greek religion. I don't think we should love and light the gods. I think it's much more complicated than that, and we should allow everything to have a full spectrum of feelings and a full spectrum of positivity, negativity, whatever. I hope any of that made sense at all. And finally, number 11, listen. The gods speak loudest in silence. And that one, I want you to wrestle with yourself. That's something I've been wrestling with a lot. I think sometimes people are like, why are the gods silent? Why are the gods not responding to me? And I think maybe it's because we spend too much time talking. I think if you listen quietly, even just with the rustling of wind through the ferns, I think you might find that they are there and they are speaking. Sometimes we just have to shut up for a change. So with that, I know this video is probably maybe a bit different than what you expected it going into, and I feel a lot better having sat outside, written some stuff in my journal, lit some incense, have some tea. And with that, I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you all so much for your patience. Like I said, it's been kind of wild. I'm not sure when I'm going to get back onto a regular schedule. I'm not going to pretend that I have those answers. But it's happening. I'm doing what I can, step by step, and that's all we can do. Let's put one foot in front of the other. All right. With that, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.